Hello, my friends, and welcome. I am coming to you live from my home office, so you guys are getting a little bit of a glimpse inside my apartment. Just wanted to kind of dialogue with you today about nonverbal communication. It is an absolutely crucial element of communication in general, and there are a lot of scholars who will say that over 90% of our communication is nonverbal. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that number is exceptionally high. But it proves the point that nonverbal communication is a significant part of how we communicate. So I wanted to dialogue about that a little bit today and just kind of go over nonverbal communication. We're going to look at different types and also just how we can try to improve upon our personal nonverbals. So let's just dive in. As we look at nonverbal communication, I want to offer up just a definition before we do anything else. So nonverbal communication, at least according to your book, all messages that transcend spoken or written words themselves. Now, this is a critical definition, and here's why. We are a very text, word-driven society. So we've already talked about this a little bit in this class, but you type on text, you type on email, you type on, Facebook, you type on Twitter, all of these different types of elements that utilize written words. So you're focusing on language. One of the things that nonverbal communication does is it kind of steps back a little bit and says, wait a second. There are elements that transcend spoken or written words. So there are elements that can detract from or that can reinforce spoken or written words. What are they? It's nonverbal communication. So the key for verbal, linguistic, the key for nonverbal, not verbal, not language-based, not linguistic, not word-driven. Okay? So as we look at nonverbal communication characteristics, we see that it is inevitable. There's a link that I'm going to post for you guys. It is basically, and I told you a little bit about this in class, but it's a History Channel biography on nonverbal communication. And one of the things that you will see, they're going to highlight a lot of different politicians and a lot of different people. But you will see that nonverbal communication is inevitable. It happens all the time. So I want you to be aware of that. I want you to pay attention to that. Nonverbal communication is the primary conveyor of our emotions. Now, this is important because it's easy for me to say how I feel. But almost inevitably, you can see how I feel much easier than if I say how I'm feeling. So just know that. Nonverbal communication is multi-channel. In our next slide, we're going to look at just all of the different channels. But it's body, it's gestures, it's appearance, posture, all of these different elements, eyes, all these different elements speak to our nonverbals. These are all of the channels that we use to articulate our nonverbals. And the fourth characteristic that your book kind of talks about, nonverbals are ambiguous. Nonverbals change depending on the culture. Nonverbals can sometimes change even just depending on gender. And a lot of times they are context determined. And so it's really easy for us to not understand a nonverbal, or to give a nonverbal that does not reinforce a verbal message. So you have to understand that they can be ambiguous at times if we either are from a different culture or if it's just a confusing nonverbal that's being sent. So excuse the small text, but if you look at this, certain elements about nonverbal communication that we can kind of look at as far as models, modalities. First of all, body, so your face and your hands, significant nonverbal communication models. Your face, at least 8 different emotions: happiness, surprise, fear, anger, sadness, disgust, contempt, interest. I'm not going to ask you to display all 8. I would assume that you can. But if you think through just your Rolodex of facial expressions that you have, you can portray a lot of different emotions. I think Jim from The Office is a great example of this. You can tell a lot about what Jim is thinking or feeling based upon his face and based upon what faces that he makes. Eyes speak volumes. We can usually see sadness. The eyes are called the windows to the soul for a reason. We can usually see sadness. We can see fear, anger, all in how our eyes portray how we're feeling. I want to camp on this idea of space for just a second because we often maybe don't think about nonverbal communication as an element of space. But we have to recognize that with nonverbal communication, there is this idea of territory. So for Americans, if you get within my intimate space, which is anywhere between 0 and 18 inches, I am freaked out. I feel awkward. I would assume that you feel awkward, but I hate it. Usually, sometimes, depending on the relationship, anyone who steps foot into my personal space, which can kind of be driven as 18 inches to 4 feet, sometimes that makes me uncomfortable. So we just kind of have to step back and look at it and say, what relationships kind of allow me to be more intimate in how I view space and in how I come at people. Touch is another example of this. It might not be appropriate for you to touch everyone on the shoulder or on the small of the back, but it might be appropriate for you to touch your spouse or boyfriend or girlfriend on the small of their back as they're walking through a door. Would I suggest doing that to Joe Schmo down the street? No, not necessarily. So a lot of this is contextual. A lot of this is based upon relationships and context. Paralanguage can also be nonverbal, so how we say what we say. What kind of linguistic tone that we use, pitch, volume, trying to actually add emphasis to our words can all be elements of nonverbal communication. 5 types of nonverbals. We don't have to camp here, but body, voice, space, time, and presentation cues, which if we look at presentation cues, there are certain elements of our self-presentation that can either detract from or add to our credibility. And especially self-presentation and appearance cues can really significantly impact how others view us. Our grooming, our haircuts, our clothing, our hygiene, smell even, can all impact our credibility and kind of how people view us, and then also are all significant nonverbal communication outlets. Rule of thumb, this is just a good public speaking rule of thumb, is that you and your appearance, dress, hygiene, etc., should be one level above your audience. So here's kind of how I view it. If you guys all started wearing dresses, and hopefully the guys wouldn't wear dresses, but if all the girls started wearing dresses and all of our guys in class started wearing, khaki pants and a polo tucked in. Well, that's, if you've been to class, you've seen that that's similar to what I wear if it's really hot. But what we have to understand is that if I'm a speaker and I'm trying to seek credibility, then I want to be at least one level above my audience. So if you guys start dressing like that, what I will probably do is wear more of the button-down, tie, probably sport coat look, because I want to have that credibility and be at least one level above you when it comes to dress and attire. As we look at just improving nonverbal communication, there are tons of different things we can talk about here, but I want to just bring about a few to your attention. First of all, just be aware. We talk a lot about this class, or a lot in this class, about self-perception and self-consciousness and all of these different kinds of things. Just know what you're doing and know what relationships constitute what nonverbal. Touch. Again, we go back to that same touch element. Don't touch everybody. But if you have a certain close friends, if you want to hug a certain close friend, that's great. What does a relationship context determine? Be purposeful in your nonverbal communication, and then I also lump the next one under this. Make sure your nonverbals match your verbals. What that means is that your nonverbal communication should reinforce your verbal messages, not detract from them, not confuse us, not take away from them. A couple things you can do to kind of improve interpretation of nonverbals. Don't assume that a specific behavior means the same thing to everyone. A great cultural example of this, I was in Africa in summer of 2008, and I went to Uganda and Rwanda specifically. And in these two countries, friends, same gender friends, will walk down the street holding hands. So you will see all over the place, 2 males holding hands, 2 females holding hands, and it's not romantic. It's just a sign of intimate friendship. Flip side of that is that they do not, that PDA amongst couples is just not heard of. So you won't see a male and a female who are dating portray in public displays of affection in Rwanda and Uganda. It's a social faux pas. Now, the flip side is that, my same gender friends in America, I don't walk down the sidewalk holding their hands. And my wife, same thing, right, with her same gender friends. But I walk down the street and hold my wife's hand all the time. So that's just a great cultural example of how a nonverbal can mean something in 2 different places. I would also just encourage you to, and this comes with a caveat, right, because we want to make sure to be respectful of other cultures. But if you are offended or if you are confused, I would encourage you to seek clarification and ask, is that nonverbal or is that gesture? You probably should actually mention the specifics of what happened. What did you mean to portray by that? Especially if you're offended, I think it's okay to say that. And it's okay to start that dialogue. With different cultures, usually what I've found is that those who are understanding of different cultures are very open to talking about their nonverbal communication and just how they relate to one another. And that's okay. It's actually great because you're starting that dialogue and you're learning from a different culture. So hopefully this wasn't too painful, just kind of sitting through this probably 10-minute lecture on nonverbal communication. If you have any questions, I would encourage you to do a couple different things. Write them down either on the discussion board, which you can utilize through Blackboard. You can send me an email, or we can talk about any questions that you have on Monday. But I would encourage you, first of all, get started on that community proposal. Do that. Don't run from that. I want you to do that. And I want you to finish by Monday, but I want you to start that as soon as possible. Second thing, I would like for you to watch at least probably 15 to 20 minutes of that History Channel body language special, because I think it's really cool to kind of see that and to see how body language experts view certain elements of nonverbal communication. But remember, it's contextual and it's based upon relationship. There are going to be some additional activities and exercises for you, but hopefully this was enjoyable for you. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. But other than that, just enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks, everybody.